In quantity surveying, what are the most common mistakes that you see?
Some of the most common mistakes we see in our world is people rushing through the tender process. So what often happens is an architect might produce their drawings and a client instantly wants to get to build once that's done. They then end up rushing through that initial tender process, not getting the cost plan done and checking what the actual rates and what that project should be costing. They rush not producing and don't do schedules or bills of quants, which enable actually looking at contractors on a like for like basis and doing a proper tender analysis. Often we see people actually going through projects without even having a contract in place. All these things are going to lead to massive mistakes. So if you don't allow enough time at the front end and doing that tender process properly, robustly, all them problems then carry through into construction, because if you don't find the right contractor, it's going to cause you problems later on down the line.
Yeah.
If you don't have the right contract in place, people don't know what their obligations are. What are my payment terms? What are the start dates? What's the end date? What are we working towards? Again, that communication that needs clarity isn't there from the start, which then means actually when you're working through the project, it causes problems.
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed in the last 10 years is the contract issue hasn't got any better. It's quite shocking as to how many people actually start a project without a contract and then come to us when it gets to the dispute side of things. So, is there anything that people can do at the front end that will alleviate the problems later on down the line?
I think fundamentally, if you're going to start any project, no matter how small or big it is, you need a contract. There needs to be parameters to work to.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to know. The contractors need to know what the payment terms are, what the start dates are, what the finish dates are. They need to know what their rectification periods are, and they need to know the parameters. The client also needs the same parameters, and someone needs to be administering that contract so it's fair. It's fair for all parties. If communication is good on a project, it will alleviate a lot of the problems that you have on a project on a day-to-day basis. Often, when you haven't got a contract or you're not abiding by the contract, you do get disputes, and they go on for sometimes years and years and cost thousands of pounds. It holds up the project. It means that things are not completed on time. It means that things are not done to the right quality, and it causes all these problems that could be alleviated if you had the contract done in the right way at the beginning of the project and followed that process robustly. Often people think a 4 to 6 week tender period is a long time from getting from the point you do a cost plan all the way through to a signed contract. Well, yeah, it might seem like a long time when you're eager and you're in a rush to start your project, but actually, what about if you don't do any of that? You say 4 weeks, but then you're adding on 2 years worth of disputes because there was no contractual agreements in place. People are not thinking about the back end of the project. They're thinking about how to get something onto site quickly, thinking it's going to save them time, when in real terms, most of the time we see it doesn't save you any time. It causes you more aggravation, it costs you more money, and it actually leads to the project taking longer than it should do anyway.
Okay. And in terms of the front end, so before that contract stage, there is a number of different documents that um, a, a client can get involved in, and that will help ease the process in the long term. Why do typically people not do that process? So going along and getting the cost plan done and the schedules of works and the bills of quantities.
A lot of people often want to save the money first of all. They don't want to pay for a cost plan. They don't want to pay for a schedule. Often, when people ask us to put a project out to tender, and we say we're going to do a cost plan, they ask why. Why do we need to do a cost plan? Why I'm going to spend 700, 800, couple of £1,000 doing a cost plan on whatever size project it might be, when I'm going to have 3 to 4 builders pricing it. But that's not the point. The point here is that actually, if your QS that you're appointing as a professional, you get them to do an independent cost plan based on market rates, benchmark rates, experience. That then document is a very valuable document when looking at tenders. So when looking at then 3 or 4 contractors tenders versus the cost plan. You look at it and go, actually, these are the market averages based on what my quantity surveyors are saying, and these are what the four contractors are saying. Ultimately, as a client or an architect or property developer, the contractor is working on the opposite side to you.
Yeah.
They're not their main goal is to make profit for their business. That's not the same as your goals. The goal collectively is to build a successful project. Your goal is to build it as efficiently as possible, and their goal is to make as much profit as possible.
Yeah.
So therefore, at the front end, when you're doing things like cost plans and schedules, always you should always be getting a cost plan, because it's a benchmark. You'll be able to look at what's high, what's low, is it front loaded, are the costs being taken at the front end and not at the back end. You have to balance everything out so you can negotiate the most efficient tender, not the cheapest tender, the most efficient.
Okay. And so with the cost plan, essentially that supports the tender analysis side of the project to allow the quantity surveyor to look at the tenders that come in from different contractors and really be able to benchmark what their pricing is looking like.
Yeah, so a cost plan can help you in a lot of ways. If you're looking for funding, a cost plan will help you to get funding, because it's a robust set of cost planning documents that enable you to then go out to your funder and say, I'm looking to raise this much money or need this much capital to build my project. And that's based on a good independent view of how much that construction project is going to cost. Then you'll look at the cost plan and use it to benchmark against the tenders, which again is a hugely valuable document. It also gives you an idea of where that project should be independently, not just with where the builders are saying it's at or where the contractors are saying it at, where your consultants, the one you're paying, the professionals you're paying, to actually be in a position to say, right, this is where the project should be.
Okay. And then one of the other common mistakes that I've seen during the quantity surveying process is people not paying for valuations. So not having a quantity surveyor come out on site and do fortnightly or monthly valuations. Can you tell us a bit more about why that's important?
Yeah, obviously, a lot of people do say, well, I'm just going to get the contractor to put their bills in every month. Well, that's okay. But who's verifying that number? Who's verifying that that work's been done? Who's verifying that them materials are on site or them orders are being placed? By appointing a quantity surveyor to do valuations, you're ultimately making sure there's a robust check at the end of the month to ensure that what's being claimed is actually what's going to be paid. You never want to be overpaying a contractor. You certainly want to be paying them for the work that they're doing, which is fair and reasonable, and that's how a contract should be run. What you don't want to be doing is overpaying and then all of a sudden communication breaks down and contractor walks away. That's going to cause big problems again to your project, because trying to get another contractor to fill them boots is hard. No second contractor wants to take over from another one. So doing valuations is really important to the progress of a project. Also, you're looking at valuations in comparison to a cash flow, which we would do at the front end. So during the tender process, you look at the cash flow and go, this is what we're expecting the milestones to be, this is what we're expecting the payments to be. Now, if your valuations don't meet your cash flows, then you automatically know there's a problem on the project.
Yeah.
Because you can go, well, actually, I was expecting a bill for £100,000 and I got one for 50. Why?
Yeah.
Is that because the project's not going well? Are we going to start missing our deadlines? Where are we going to be? It enables you to start sorting them problems out before they actually become problems, and start putting things into place to ensure that you can manage the project as efficiently as possible.
Okay. And then later on in the project, so once a project has started, what other issues have you commonly seen on site that could have maybe been alleviated by quantity surveying services?
Well, often when people rush through that initial process, they haven't done a proper tender analysis. Things have been missed. You end up with variations. When you get variations, that means your price is going up. That means your project is going to take longer. So your duration is longer. So when you're not following that robust process at the front end and not ironing out the issues at the front end, you're then taking a longer time adding project time, adding project cost during the project because that's not been done. Also, by having a cost plan and a schedule done at the front end,
Yeah.
you enable the project team to look at the project documents before they go out to tender as a whole. So we will look at the structural engineers plans, we'll look at the architect's plans, we'll look at the specifications, we'll look at the M&E consultant and the interior designer, and we'll make sure they're all coordinated.
Okay.
Ultimately, you'll always have problems where one consultant's shown one detail and then another consultant shown another detail. Now, when you've got two separate details like that, what's ending up happening is there's a conflict of information there.
Yeah.
And the contractor's going to price one or the other. If it's not right, if that piece of information is not correct, during the project, all that's going to happen is the contractor's going to say, well, I didn't have that information, or that was a conflict, and we priced for that, and now actually this one's going to be more, and it's going to take longer. So it enables us to iron out all these conflicting pieces of information, all these requests for information before you even get onto site, which is going to mean that that project is going to run much more smoothly in terms of time, cost, and quality all the way throughout the project because you followed a robust process at the front end.
Okay. And I guess the key there is that you are able to build those relationships and have that communication from really early on in the project, which allows that strong relationship building throughout the project.
Yeah, I think construction's built on good communication. There's so many people involved, from subcontractors to contractors, suppliers, consultants. There's so many people involved. Communication is key. And if you don't get that communication right and you don't iron out the problems, there's always problems. There's always problems in construction that you'll find. And unless the project team in its entirety work well and work strongly together, there's always going to be issues.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is, by having a good tender process, is have a cohesive team that work well together and effectively are in a position that they understand each other, they understand how each other likes to communicate, they understand how each other want the project to work, and effectively be in a position where they can work well together throughout the duration of the project, whether that's 3 months or whether it's 2 years.
Yeah. So by having a good quantity surveyor on board, essentially they can bridge the gap and the communication via all the consultants and all the parties that are involved in a project.
And any good quantity surveyor is worth their weight in gold. We always say to clients that, look, whatever you pay in fees to us, we would expect to save double that
Yeah.
in project costs, just through good management of the project, good management of the finances, a robust tender process. We're not looking to slow the tender process down. We're trying to make the tender process as efficient as possible in terms of timing, so that ultimately you meet the goals of the project, which is from front end to back end, not just speeding through a tender process to then get onto site, to then iron through all these issues as they arise on a day-to-day basis, because that just causes way more problems than it should.
So I think one of the most important things for people to realise is that in construction, a number of things can go wrong. But if the front end of a project has been priced accurately, has been, sought out and gone through in detail at the front end, later on in the project, it will make sure that the project runs a lot more smoothly.
That's exactly how it works. So it's not something we would ever rush. We would make sure it's done in an efficient time period. We're not looking to slow the project down, but what we certainly want to do is iron out any of the problems that we see coming. You know, we've been doing this for 15 years as a business, and we know, we can look at our tender package and know that these potential issues might arise, and you iron them out before they even arise to stop any of these problems coming.